Can you all see the worksheet in large print? Photosynthesis,
Yes.
energy production, you can see that?
Yes.
All right, let's start with question number 1. Who will volunteer for question 1 and tell me your name and then proceed? If there are no volunteers, I'll have to start.
I will.
What's your name?
Veronica Munoz. Veronica Munoz.
Veronica Munoz. Okay, go ahead, Veronica.
Okay. 1. Indicate 3 processes by which a cell can generate ATP. A. Substrate level hydroxylation. B. Product level phosphorylation. C. Photophosphorylation. D. Reductive phosphorylation. E. Substrate level phosphorylation. F. Enzymatic glycosylation. Or G. Oxidative phosphorylation. It is C, E, and G.
C, E, and G. Anyone else have any different view of it? No? Well, you are right. It is those 3. And what I'd like to emphasize here is that these are, on a question like this, they're just words. But what we're going to do today and on Wednesday is make these words into real processes so that you know where they occur, what they do, why the cell bothers to do each of these things. So we're going to elaborate on these 3 types of phosphorylation in some detail. Okay, let's go to question number 2. Volunteer.
I can do it.
And your name?
Melody Garcia.
Melody Garcia, okay.
So the question says, photosynthesis is a source of energy for most of the Earth's life forms. However, there is an alternative process known as chemosynthesis that can sustain life in the absence of sunlight.
Yes, you're right. And the reason I put this question in as something for you to think about. Remember, this is a worksheet. It's to point you toward topics that I think are important and that will probably be treated in upcoming quizzes and tests. So the important point I want to make here is that, first of all, it's not stated here, but there are a number of sources of energy on this planet. The sun is just one of them. So we have waves, we have wind, we have geothermal, nuclear, a lot of different sources of energy. But life does not have access to most of these forms of energy. Life has access to the sun, but that's not the only source. Chemosynthesis, which we describe the details of that, how it differs from photosynthesis, occurs in the absence of light, and it can be the sole source of energy to sustain life. So I just want you to be aware that there is this alternative for life, alternative to photosynthesis. Okay, number 3, who?
I can do it. Oh, you can, it's okay.
Name?
James.
James Campbell, okay.
The process of photosynthesis consumes energy and is anabolic, whereas respiration releases energy and is catabolic.
Yes. Those answers are both correct. There are conceivably other answers that you could put into those spaces, but what I was looking for is just to make sure that you know that energy input process is anabolic and it produces something, and the opposite is catabolic and releases energy. Okay, the next one is a multiple answer. Who wants to volunteer for number 4?
I can read it.
And that's Rachel?
Yes.
Okay, read it.
In oxidation reduction reactions, which statements are true? A, electrons are transferred back and forth between molecules called carriers. B, transfer of electrons is asymmetrical. C, a substance that gains an electron is said to be reduced. D, only reduction occurs in photorespiration. E, when redox occurs anaerobically, there is third-party participation. F, a substance that loses an electron is said to be oxidized. G, oxidation and reduction reactions always occur in pairs. H, the function of redox in energy metabolism is to release energy for ATP synthesis. And the answers are A, C, F, G, and H.
Anyone else have a comment or thought about this question? Well, I agree with Rachel. Let's talk about what's wrong with the ones that are wrong. B, transfer of electrons is asymmetrical. That's kind of an obtuse way to put it, but the point is that oxidation and reduction always occur in pairs. So electrons are transferred in one direction, they are also transferred in the opposite direction. And that is true of all redox reactions. Only reduction occurs in photorespiration. Well, that's not true, because if reduction occurs, doesn't matter if it's a photorespiration or some other process, if reduction occurs, oxidation also occurs. And E, when redox occurs anaerobically, there is third-party participation. Again, that's not an absolutely clear way to state that, but what I was thinking about when I wrote it is that oxidation and reduction have just 2 parties, the oxidation party and the reduction one. Okay, well, the next one is about Scott Pittman. Who wants to do that?
I can do this one.
And your name?
Jordan Farrell.
Okay, Jordan.
Number 5, Scott Pittman remembers the redox process by OILRIG. And it is true, this acronym should prompt you to remember that oxidation is loss, whereas reduction is gain of an electron.
Yeah, that's right. And I put this in because mnemonics are useful for some people and not others, but just in case it is useful to remember oil rig, we can thank Scott for introducing that. Oxidation is loss, oil, reduction is gain, rig. So if that's helpful to you, great. If not, don't worry about it. Okay, number 6, volunteer. No one? For number 6? Santa, are you there? Would you like to do number 6?
I could go ahead, Erica.
Erica Berger, okay, go ahead.
So absorption of light. Hold on.
Read the question first.
Oh, sorry. Okay, events occurring during photosynthesis and respiration take place in particular subcellular compartments. Match event list on left with location list below on the right. So A, absorption of light would be the thylakoid. And then B, Calvin's cycle would be, hold on, let me get my paper. Chloroplast stroma.
And C, photosystem 1, is also thylakoid. And then D, Krebs cycle, is mitochondrial matrix, an oxidative phosphorylation. Sorry, E, glycolysis is cytoplasm. And then F is oxidative phosphorylation, is the inner mitochondrial membrane. And yes,
And that's it.
yes.
So very, very good. Anybody disagree or not understand any of those answers? Because they're all correct. So I asked this type of question to help you think about where in the cell things are happening. And we'll have more of this as we go along. All right, that's number 6. Let's go to number 7. Who wants to take number 7?
Professor,
Yeah?
will we get a copy of this answered worksheet?
Yeah. Thanks for reminding me. I will send this with the answers after class.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'll send 2 things. That and also send an announcement about test 3, which will be next Monday. Okay, back to the worksheet. A volunteer for question 7.
I can read question number 7.
Okay, is that Ingrid?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I just don't know how to pronounce the first word, but I'll try.
Okay. Try it and we'll let you know if it's recognizable.
Chiasmosis.
Chemiosmosis.
Chiasmosis. It's critical step in ATP production. Indicate which items below are true about chiasmosis. 2, it generates ATP by passing electrons across a semi-permeable membrane. The source of electrons for chiasmosis, it's the electron transport chain. It is part of the Calvin cycle, and an ion concentration gradient is essential for chemiosmosis.
Chemiosmosis for that process. Yeah. Yeah, you're right with all your answers. 1 and 3 are not correct. 1 says it occurs during oxidative phosphorylation, but not photophosphorylation. That's not true because it occurs in both of them. And number 3, it's a catabolic process. That's not true. It's anabolic. And why is it anabolic? What does it make? Well, it uses energy to convert ADP to ATP. And so it releases, it's anabolic in that it releases energy. It makes something, it makes ATP from ADP. And it can do that by any of 3 different processes. And again, we'll go into more details about that later. All right, good. Number 8 has to do with the 2 main cycles that we talk about, the Calvin cycle and the Krebs cycle. Who would like to run us through these questions?
I will.
Jonathan Garcia?
Yeah. All right. Compare the Calvin cycle with the Krebs cycle. On the list on the left is a set of characteristics for each one. Indicate the cycle it is associated with. C for Calvin and K for Krebs. Requires oxygen is Krebs. Creates glucose is Calvin. Occurs only in plants is Calvin. Produces ATP and CO2 is Krebs. An anabolic process is Calvin. Occurs in mitochondrial matrix is Krebs. Part of the photosynthesis is Calvin. Oxidized glucose is Krebs. Includes the chloroplast dark reaction is Calvin. Part of the aerobic respiration is Krebs. Occurs in chloroplast stroma is Calvin. Consumes ATP and CO2 is Calvin. A catabolic process is Krebs.
Very good. You got them all right. And again, we'll review more of these processes in detail so you can see how and why these things occur and why they occur in the places that they do. So that's sort of a memory kind of question, but again, I think that the information that we'll talk about will help you to remember these things. A story problem, number 9. Who wants to read the story?
I can.
Santa?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
This day, on your walk along the pathway in the woods, you notice that one of the trees growing near the path has yellow leaves. At first, you assume the tree isn't dying of old age, but over the course of several days, you can see that the tree is actually growing. You know plants grow because they are photosynthetic, a process that requires the pigment chlorophyll, which is green, not yellow. How can you explain that this tree can grow? The tree has green chlorophyll that is masked by yellow pigment. And how would this tree be distinguished from a parasitic plant?
Okay. That's the answer. The tree has chlorophyll. And the reason it's yellow is that it also produces a pigment, which is not green, it's yellow. And it produces enough of that pigment to mask the green color of chlorophyll. Now the question is, for any of you to answer, how would this tree be distinguished from a parasitic plant?
I don't know if this is right. I don't know how you'd be able to tell by just looking, but parasitic plants don't have any chlorophyll in it at all.
Yeah, that's true. Parasitic plants can be yellow, and they can also be orange. They can be other colors. They're never green, but there's still another way that you could distinguish this from an autonomous plant that can make its own food. If it's not green and it's growing on another plant, growing on a green plant, then it's parasitic. So a parasitic plant will never be found growing on its own. I think I mentioned at an earlier point that here in San Diego, in this area, when you drive out in the countryside and you look at hillsides, vegetation on hillsides, you'll often see patches of bright yellow or bright orange. And those patches always occur in the presence of green plants. And those are truly parasitic plants. They make colored pigments, but they don't have chlorophyll. Okay, that's an important point. Someone, in fact, asked about that in an earlier class. The energy currency of the cell is, who wants to take this?
I'll do number 10.
Fabian?
EATP.
Yeah. Yep, that was too easy. Okay, number 11, who?
I can do that one too since the other one was short.
Okay, do.
So it's true or false during the aerobic respiration, glycose yields. I can't see the rest of the question.
Just a minute. I
Okay.
lost the Zoom.
It's okay.
There, now you can see it.
So true or false? During aerobic respiration, glycolysis yields 4 net ATP molecules, and Krebs cycle yields 34 ATP molecules, for a total of 30 ATP molecules produced from the oxidation of one molecule of glucose. And the answer would be true.
Yeah, that's true. And we'll go through some pathways a little later when we look at slides, and it will show you how to add up the ATP molecules and where they come from, oxidative phosphorylation or substrate level phosphorylation. Okay, next one is about lions. Who wants to do that?
I can read that one. It says,
Ingrid?
yeah, it says, lions are obligate carnivores. They do not eat plants, yet lions usually live in areas containing vegetation. It is a coincidence, or do lions need plants in order to survive? Lions' prey eat plants, which are nearby, so that prey are accessible to lions.
Yeah.
Mm.
So the reason I ask that is that to focus your attention on the fact that all life, with the exception of chemisynthesis, all life depends on the sun. So although lions don't have chlorophyll, they're not photosynthetic, they depend on organisms that are photosynthetic, because the prey, the animals that they eat, are the ones that eat the plants. Okay, respiration. Someone read 13.
I will. It's Aubrey.
Okay.
Respiration and photosynthesis are often portrayed as having opposite functions, but there are also similarities. Identify similarities from the list below. A, dependency on enzymes to lower activation energy on their chemical reactions. B, requirement for infrared radiation. C, result in the fixation of carbon. D, occur inside membrane-bound subcellular organelles. And then E, occur in green plants, and F, involve the Calvin cycle. And the answer would be A, D, and E.
Yes, that's correct. And I would like to ask you if E is a surprise.
Yes, it was a surprise because I did not answer E originally.
And that's why I put it there. So the point and the thing that you need to remember here is that respiration, deriving energy from food, occurs in all living organisms, whether they're green or not. So photosynthesis only occurs in green organisms, but respiration occurs in all of them, including green plants. And the other point I wanted to make here is that even though we think of respiration and photosynthesis as being completely independent and separate from one another, they do have some common features. Number 14. I want to read it.
Professor,
Yes.
what would occur in the parasitic plants then if it's not photosynthesis?
What would occur in terms of where does the energy come from?
Yes.
From the green plant. So parasitic plants are always attached, physically attached to a green plant. So what they do is, as the plant makes sugars for itself, the parasitic plant taps into that through the vascular system and takes some of the plant's food. You might say this is not fair to the green plant, and it's true, it isn't. Very often parasitic plants kill their hosts. As they grow, they keep demanding more and more and more sugar until finally the host plant can't keep up. And for that reason, again, if you're looking out on the hillside in San Diego and you see a yellow patch and you see that the plant that it's growing on is dead, that's why, because the parasite killed it. Okay. Number 14, feedback inhibition. Someone to read it?
I'll do it.
Santa?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
True or false, feedback inhibition is a term that designates an unusual class of enzymes that have no effect on the activation energy of a reaction, and that's false.
Yeah, it's false, and why? Anybody want to comment on what is true about feedback inhibition? Do you remember how it works? Feedback inhibition has to do with two critical points in a pathway, the first step and the last step, or the end product. So the product of the pathway is what causes the inhibition. If its concentration gets too high, it will start to inhibit the first enzyme, the first step in the pathway, to shut it down so that it stops producing too much of the product. So this question will probably come up again to make sure that you know why this statement is false and what actually does happen in feedback inhibition, because it's a very important mechanism to regulate metabolism. Okay. Who wants to do number 15, acetyl-CoA?
I'll go, Professor.
Veronica, okay.
Yes. Acetyl CoA is a so-called crossroads molecule. It is the starting point of the Krebs cycle, and it can be derived from a wide variety of complex molecules, which include A, polysaccharides, B, nucleic acids, C, electrochemical gradients, D, lipids, E, chlorophyll, F, proteins, or G, hemoglobin. And answers A, D, and F.
Yeah. And in the slides that I'll show you later, we'll see this diagrammatically illustrated where acetyl-CoA can come from, these three major classes of polymer. All right, number 16. Someone want to read that? Chlorophyll?
I'll read it.
Okay, Jonathan.
Chlorophyll is a plant pigment that captures the energy in sunlight by absorbing red wavelengths of light and blue wavelengths of light. Well, not green wavelengths of light, which it reflects.
Mm-hmm. Right, and this is to recall in your mind the electromagnetic spectrum, which has this very small gap where there is visible light. Visible means visible to us. It's also visible to plants. But the important thing to remember here is that why do plants see it? They see it because of chlorophyll, and there are two types of chlorophyll. One absorbs red light and the other absorbs blue light, and that's the light that provides the energy to make food, to make chemical bonds. Plants' chlorophyll does not absorb in the green area of the spectrum. Instead, it reflects in the green area, and that's why plants are green. The next one, I won't ask anyone to read it. Photosynthesis can occur in any part of a plant. That's not true. Why is it not true? Think about the structure of a plant.
Oh, sorry.
It only takes place anywhere the plant is green, which is the chloroplast.
Yeah, and what parts of the plant are not green?
The roots.
Roots for sure. And if there's any other, some plants have weird structures, but if it makes a structure that doesn't have chlorophyll, then it doesn't do photosynthesis. Okay, the main components of a chloroplast are, someone read that? Someone who hasn't spoken yet. Who might that be? Isabel?
Yeah, I can read it. So it says the main components of a chloroplast are A, vacuole, B, thylakoid membrane, C, stroma, D, mitochondrion, E, grana, F, endoplasmic reticulum, G, outer membrane, and H, Golgi apparatus, and I, thylakoid compartment. And I put B, C, E, G, and I.
Yep, you're right on all of them. Let's talk about the ones that are incorrect. Chloroplast doesn't have a vacuole. The cell in which a chloroplast is found has a huge vacuole, usually. The chloroplast itself has a matrix, but not a vacuole. Main components of a chloroplast are not the mitochondrion, not the endoplasmic reticulum, and not the Golgi apparatus. These are other subcellular organelles that do other things. They're not involved in light reactions. And the last one is, I think, very easy. It's false. The chloroplast harvests chemical energy from light waves. It does this through the activities of not one light reaction, but up to a maximum of 3 light reactions. Now, why is that false? We talk about the light reactions that occur in the thylakoid. What are they? Does the word photosystem come to your mind? Photosystem 1 and photosystem 2. Light is first absorbed in photosystem 2. And after that set of reactions, there's another photosystem called photosystem 1. And that also occurs in the thylakoid. But 2 quanta of light are absorbed by the thylakoids. 1 in photosystem 2 and 1 in photosystem 1. There are not 3. Okay, that's all the questions that I have. And again, the purpose of this worksheet was to point you in the right directions to study. And each of the questions suggests an area that you should be familiar with. The questions that I might ask on a quiz or a test will probably not be worded exactly like these are, but will deal with the same topics. Now, to do this worksheet in class, I chose to show you a version of it with the answers indicated. Instead of showing you, for purposes of discussion, one without the answers, which, based on what we've done today, which would be more useful for you in terms of studying?
As opposed to what, Professor?
Well, if I make a worksheet and we discuss it in class, we can discuss, as we look at it, we can discuss either a version of it that has the answers indicated, as this one does, or not indicated, in which case it wouldn't be obvious what the answers are. And I'm just wondering, for your purposes, in terms of making use of the worksheet, is it better to have answers or not have answers?
I believe having the answers helps, it makes it more helpful as making it as a review.
Okay, so you vote for having the answers like we did today.
Yes.
I vote too for that.
Okay.
I agree too with that.
Okay. Well, it certainly is more efficient in that we don't have to stumble around having a discussion looking for answers. So is there anyone who would prefer to review worksheets without answers? Hearing nothing, I think the consensus is that you'd like to do it like we did today, have the answers indicated so that we can discuss not only what's right, but what's wrong about each question. Okay. I will send this worksheet with the answers to you after class. And right now I'm going to take it down. You see the overview slide?
Yes.
Okay. Again, you've seen this before, and I show it again just to remind you of how all these topics tie together. We first talked about energy, where it comes from, and how life forms use it. We talked about energy, or about enzymes, their structure, their function, and how an enzyme acts. How does it exert its influence on a substrate? And importantly, we talked about how enzyme activity is regulated. Regulation is critical for development of an organism. And we've talked a little bit about photosynthesis and respiration. Talked a lot about that last lecture. And today, I'd like to focus on respiration. It's not possible to talk entirely about respiration without photosynthesis creeping in now and then. But the focus today will be on respiration, how energy is derived from the food we eat. Aerobic respiration and fermentation, which is anaerobic, without oxygen. Okay, an overview of the cycles. We have aerobic on the left, anaerobic on the right. So aerobic is cellular respiration. We have glycolysis. We'll talk about that in detail. We have the Krebs cycle, which is downstream from glycolysis. The Krebs cycle feeds into the electron transport chain, which is oxidative phosphorylation. It's one of the 3 ways that ATP can be made. And all this happens in the air, in oxygen. If the environment is anaerobic, no oxygen, we can have either lactic acid formation, or we can have alcohol, ethanol, produced. Now, lactic acid formation is important in muscles because that's how you know your muscle is tired, when it starts to burn. Alcohol formation is important because under anaerobic conditions, microbes, especially yeasts, turn glucose into alcohol and carbon dioxide. So here's an overview, and this is a picture that you should have in your mind. So think of this big orange or big yellow box as a cell. And on one side, or the outside, we have the cytosol, also known as the cytoplasm. And the critical organelle for energy production is the mitochondrion. That's the darker yellow object. So it all starts with glycolysis. And glycolysis, glucose is converted to pyruvate by a whole series of steps that we'll talk about later. And when that happens, you get a substrate level phosphorylation, 1 or 2 ATP molecules. More importantly, what you get is electrons carried by one of these electron carriers, NADH. It can be either NADH in respiration or NADPH in photorespiration. So these electrons then leave the cytosol and are transferred into the mitochondrion, as is pyruvate. Pyruvate is made from glucose in the cytoplasm, and then it enters the mitochondrion. And when it does, it goes into the Krebs cycle. The Krebs cycle, again, can yield substrate level phosphorylation, ATPs. But the main source of ATP molecules is these electrons that enter the electron transport chain. That is oxidative phosphorylation coupled to chemiosmosis to give a lot of ATP. So we have 2 substrate level phosphorylations and then an oxidative phosphorylation step, which generates a lot of ATP. And we'll talk a little more about that. But again, the electron transport chain is coupled to chemiosmosis to yield ATP. The grooming of pyruvate. Okay, here at the top, these structures, you have glucose, the cyclic form of glucose, yields 2 molecules of pyruvate plus a small amount of energy. Again, we're talking about, circled in red, the cytoplasm, cytosol, and the mitochondrion. So this pyruvate that's made from the splitting of glucose in the cytoplasm enters through a transport mechanism into the mitochondrion. And when it does, it's converted to acetyl-CoA by attaching an acetyl group to coenzyme A. coenzyme is a vitamin, coenzyme A. Okay, so spatially, this is how and where it happens. Substrate level and oxidative phosphorylation. Again, this is presenting the same information in a different way. Again, we have the cytosol, we have the mitochondrion, we have glycolysis going from 1 glucose to 2 pyruvates plus 2 ATPs in the cytosol. Then the pyruvate enters the mitochondrion, is converted to acetyl-CoA, which starts the Krebs cycle. And the Krebs cycle, the main reason for it does generate a little bit of ATP, 2 molecules. The main thing the Krebs cycle does is produce electrons for the electron transport chain, which occurs in the inner mitochondrial membrane. Mitochondrion has 2 membranes, the outer membrane, which is the border of the organelle, and the inner mitochondrial membrane, which is where the action occurs. That's where the electron transport chain, coupled with this little pink thing here, pink and green, represents chemiosmosis. And between the transport of electrons down the steps, down the electron transport chain, coupled with chemiosmosis at every step, yields from 32 to 34 ATP. So whereas you get in glycolysis 2 ATPs from substrate level phosphorylation, Krebs cycle gives you 2 more. The electron transport chain gives you 32 to 34. So if the stoichiometry is normal, you would get from 1 molecule of glucose, 38 molecules of ATP.
You said a stoichiometry?
Yeah, the stoichiometry of ATP generation. So by using that term, I meant the stoichiometry between 1 molecule of glucose and 38 molecules of ATP. Now, we keep talking about glycolysis, and I haven't really told you what it is. At the top, again, a molecule of glucose undergoes glycolysis. You get 2 pyruvates plus ATP plus 2 electrons. Okay, in this big yellow arrow, what really happens? The 9 steps of glycolysis from glucose to pyruvate. You start with glucose, the purple box. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. You can go around and end up over in the yellow box, pyruvate, and 9 enzymatic reactions have occurred. Now, you don't have to memorize all these intermediate steps. My point in showing you this is so that you know what glycolysis really means. It's not a one-step conversion from glucose, 1 glucose to 2 pyruvates. It goes through a 9-step process to get from 1 glucose to 2 pyruvates. So is that clear to everyone? Glycolysis is quite a complicated pathway, but the end result is really all we care about. 2 pyruvates from 1 glucose. And pyruvate is the start then of energy production. I have to end early today. I may not be able to finish this because you have to take 20 minutes of your time for the quiz, and so I need to cut 20 minutes off of lecture time. So acetyl-CoA is a very important molecule in energy metabolism. It's the high energy fuel for the Krebs cycle. It's often called a crossroads compound. It's a common pathway point for the extraction of energy from carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, all these polymers. And that's catabolic. However, acetyl-CoA can be used as a building block for synthesis of fatty acids. So in that sense, it's anabolic. It builds up fatty acids from smaller molecules. So to make sense of this, look at the structure of acetyl-CoA. It starts on the right here with phosphorylated ADP. So you remember adenine from nucleic acids. This is the structure of adenine and ribose. And for ADP, you have two phosphate groups, and that makes adenosine. However, if adenosine is phosphorylated yet again at the 3' position, you now have a phosphorylated molecule. If you add to that a vitamin, pantothenic acid, now that whole molecule is coenzyme A. Then if acetate is attached to that large molecule via a high energy bond, that is acetyl-CoA. So that is the molecule that we're talking about in energy metabolism. Any questions about where acetyl-CoA comes from? Acetyl-CoA can be involved in either catabolic or anabolic reactions. And just to make the point that energy can be extracted from these polymers, carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, as you see here. You've seen this slide before.
Sir, do you hear me?
Yes?
Okay. We can check the formula, chemical formula for the other one. Yeah, here.
Uh-huh.
What's the chemical formula for it? You don't know?
You mean write it as a chemical reaction?
Yeah.
You could either look it up or you could go through and count the atoms. But this is the structure.
Okay.
And if you really want to know what the chemical formula is, the easiest thing would be to look it up on the web, or you can count the atoms of each, the number of each type of atom and add them all together.
Well, thanks, sir.
So when we eat food, most of what we eat is comprised of either proteins, polysaccharides, and lipids. And these things can all be converted to monoform. In other words, single amino acids, single sugars, and single fatty acids. And they, in turn, all of them can be converted to acetyl-CoA. So that's why acetyl-CoA is so important. Why this molecule is so important, why it's a so-called crossroads compound. Because acetyl-CoA is the first step in the Krebs cycle. And why is that so important? The Krebs cycle is also known as the citric acid cycle. And why is that so important? Well, when the Krebs cycle turns, it not only generates a little bit of ATP, it produces a lot of electrons, which can go to the electron transport chain and be converted to ATP plus carbon dioxide. So this is an overview of the catabolic pathways that lead from the food we eat to the energy that we derive from that food. Yeah, I don't have time to go over the rest of these slides. So I'm going to stop at this point today, and we'll finish up the rest of this slide set on Wednesday and go on to the next topic, or maybe we'll review some more, not sure. At any rate, I'm going to put this down, and anybody have anything they want to say before I end the session, and you can go on to take quiz 8.
Just to confirm, we don't have class on Wednesday, right?
You don't have class, you do have class this coming Wednesday.
For Veterans Day?
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, Veterans Day is Cuimaca has it as an observed holiday.
Does,
It does.
okay.
So we don't have class on Wednesday.
Okay, no class on Wednesday.
Okay, well, that had escaped me. Okay, no class on Wednesday. And then on Monday is test 3. So we don't have class on Monday either, but you do have all day on Monday to take test 3.
And if anybody's interested, I put the chemical formula for acetyl-CoA as well as its IUPAC name in chat.
Okay, thanks, Scott. Okay. Anything else? I won't see you again until a week from Wednesday. But again, if you want to stay in touch with either me or Scott in the meantime, please do. And Scott, I think you do have a workshop coming up in a half hour.
That would be correct, sir.
Okay. I'm going to stop sharing.